Hi, my name is Steve. I am the head of front-end engineering at Temporal. We are going to talk about React performance. And performance is a multifaceted thing to talk about, right? Because even if you were trying to make a React app performant, there are other things that involve, that are performance React adjacent to the performance of your React application, right? For instance, if you follow every piece of advice in this talk and it's not on a CDN, there's pieces there, right? There are other pieces to performance. So, at this talk we're going to focus mostly on what that means in terms of a React application. And I think it's super exciting because along the way, you kind of learn a little bit more about how React works. And so we'll kind of get into what we're going to talk about and go over today. I do want to point out that there are not one, not two, but 5 repos because coming up with example apps that highlight every different thing you want to talk about. Doing that one app turns out is difficult. Doing it in 5 apps, it's not difficult. Yeah, it's easy to cover all things, but then you have 5 apps. So I will put these here now. For people who are tuning in live, they are in the chat. For those of you watching later, they're probably someplace convenient, below or next to this video that you're watching. But yes, I would right now we will start. They are effectively in chronological order, so no pressure. But we'll do a few little challenges and Splunking adventures with the React developer tools, solve different kinds of problems and different challenges. One of them, I've just hidden the slow part in various places. You can go suss it out and figure out how to solve for it. And so yeah, we have some practical examples that we can work through in our time together. So let's kind of just level set and talk about what are we going to talk about in this course and who is it for and stuff along those lines. Basically, if you're looking for more insight into actually how React does the thing, right? You're I heard something virtual DOM, right, or something along those lines. We will in the effort to understand how we can either A, help the performance of our React applications, or B, accidentally hurt the performance of our React applications, right? We are accidentally going to have to learn how React reacts, right? And then along the way, the kind of core thing is building a tool set for diagnosing performance issues in React. React is decently fast out of the box. One of the things I will say is that a lot of the applications we are going to use are simplified versions, right? Sometimes I had to put an intentionally slow piece. I'm all right, let's put 10,000 rows on the page, right? Most performance issues are usually the accumulation of a bunch of tiny things that happened over 3, 6 months, a year. None of them in and of themselves were maybe the one big thing. It is possible to do one big terrible thing that slows down your app, but you usually find that out pretty quickly. And then it's who made the last commit to main? And you kind of reverse engineer from there. I think what is more interesting and probably more practical is the hey, when we did git init and whatever, everything was great. 18 months in, and now we're you start the jokes about how you're going to jokingly rewrite the app, and then eventually the jokes become a not joke thing, right? And so this is to stop you from that thing, because everyone thinks that's a good idea in the beginning, and I've done it more than once. It's never a good idea. And then I think probably the piece that I'm most excited about is as we walk towards those first 2 bullets, looking at how to follow React best practices, understanding why they are what they are, right? So you ideally don't get yourself into the situation where you have this increasingly burdensome amount of bugs you have to find. The nice part about solving these performance issues is the techniques that we're going to see on these relatively small example apps that are clear and to the point. Those techniques are the same ones that you use when it's a big tangled mess of performance bugs. So the solving it is just applying it repeatedly. It's kind of untying a big knot, right? You just start pulling out the threads with the technique you know how to do, and that is definitely a running theme around here. Generally speaking, there are kind of 3 major topics and about 3 or 4 major ways that you can solve for performance issues in React. So what are we going to learn? We're going to learn about all the caching and memoizing stuff that you see, particularly like the moment you go like React performance into Google and you see these blog posts are like throw React memo on everything, right? That's not a good idea. And like the nice part is we will understand what the trade-offs are at that point. It is a tool that sometimes you need to use and sometimes it is the right choice. But the second bullet of the way that you structure your components and the way that you structure your state sometimes can actually like eliminate the performance problem without having to use like, I'm going to cache this and memoize that. Because one of the themes, and we're going to talk, like I have a slide dedicated to Steve's golden rule of performance. I'll do a spoiler now, which is that not doing stuff is faster than doing stuff, right? And there's corollaries to that, which is doing stuff later is better than doing it now. These work for both life as well as performance, by the way. But the act of like checking to see if something's in the cache or memoized, that is a thing, right? And so yes, if it saves you more work than rendering an expensive tree, totally. At the same time, if you structure your code where you don't have to check, well, that's way faster, right? And so we'll talk about like how you can actually not have to use the kind of common performance tools and get better performance than having to use them. And then React 18 brought a bunch of new like concurrency features and like for the like weapons grade performance problem that you really need to solve for. And we'll take a look at those brand new concurrency features in React and like how to use them and when they're appropriate. They are definitely the like, okay, I have a very bespoke special issue that no amount of rearranging my components is going to solve. You now have some really great tools for solving that. This is the last slide in the deck. It's also the like fourth or fifth slide or whatever, fifth slide, but it's also the 48th slide as well. And so kind of just give you a preview of the end and where we end at the end of this whole story together, which is the kind of like hierarchy that you should follow when solving a performance problem in React, right? One is if you can just structure your components and state in a way that eases the problem, well, that's good because you're not like, other than rearranging your code, you're not doing the memoization and caching and those extra checks, right? So that is inherently going to be faster, right? And like caching and memoization are solid strategies, but not only do they have a hopefully smaller cost than rendering that entire part of the tree, but like if you mess up caching, you can have weird bugs, right? So it's like you have to hope that the medicine is better than the disease sometimes, right? As they say in the only two hard problems in computer science are naming things, cache and validation, off by one errors, right? As somebody who had to name a bunch of projects, I definitely feel number one. As somebody who's been bitten by the caching memoization bugs, I understand number two as well. Then we have some of the newer APIs in React. Suspense is a set of APIs. Really, there's about one of them that you can use currently, which is the idea of like lazy loading components. Stuff like lazily doing data fetching is only available if you use a highly opinionated framework like Next or Remix or something along those lines. So we'll just cover the ones that are generally applicable to React apps today, which is loading components lazily, which who doesn't like doing stuff lazily? And then lastly, we'll talk a little bit about the transition API, which is brand new to React 18, and how and when and why you might use it, as well as like how exactly it works and all those things. So that's kind of where we end up.